kindly support. I'm going to start again. Good morning and welcome to this Euractiv online event, which is kindly supported by PKEE, the Polish Electricity Association. My name is Frédéric Simon. I'm the Energy and Environment Editor of Euractiv, and I will be your host for today's event, which is titled How to Develop the Heating Sector to Ensure Better Air Quality. Now, today's debate will focus on the decarbonization of the heating sector, which makes up around 40% of energy use in households. And with the war in Ukraine, EU countries are now coming under pressure to eliminate Russian gas entirely from the heating sector, which is going to be a huge challenge, of course. So how can Europe speed up the decarbonization of heating, and how can that contribute at the same time to improve air quality? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Piotr Szperczak, who is in charge of the District Heating Department at the Polish Ministry of Climate and Environment, Claudia Canevary, Head of Unit in charge of Energy Efficiency at the European Commission's Energy Department, Kieran Cuff, an Irish MEP who is Rapporteur on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive in the European Parliament for the Greens Party, and Margherita Tolotto from the European Environmental Bureau. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us today. We'll start this online event with a series of short opening statements from the speakers, and then we'll open up to a panel discussion that will also include questions from the audience. To put questions to the speakers, just use the chat, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will take questions directly from there. So we'll get started with the opening remarks in a few minutes, but before we do that, let me pass the floor first to Patrick Dembski, Vice President of the Toruń Group in Poland, for some opening remarks. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frederick. It's a great pleasure for me to start this debate. I have to apologize for my voice, but yesterday we got a great football game inside of the capital city, Silesia, in Katowice. So I was taking a part in the main song, Twist and Shout. So I hope you understand that. It's great pleasure to open this today meeting on Euractiv. And the topic that we are discussing at this debate, how to develop the heating sector and to ensure better air quality, is a significant question, and it's a great, really debate. It's crucial debate, as air pollution has an impact on the human health, on the human homes, on the human, on the neighbors. However, due to current geopolitical situation, all energy-related themes should also be seen in the context of war in Ukraine. European Union, as a community based on the sound ethical principles, should pay particular attention to moral values. That is why the direction of energy policy, especially in the field of energy carriers and energy sources, shall be determined in a highly responsible manner. Let diversified energy mix, wide range of energy supply directions, and energy independence be our weapon. A new recognition of symbol of the European Union. Speaking about the air quality, what we hear very often in the public debate is that the smoke and the bad air quality are caused by power plants. However, we need to know that the statement is not the whole true, or it's not true at all. Because since over a dozen years, the energy sector, also Polish energy sector, has been undergoing a transition driven by environmental and climate protection and care for the human health. The Polish energy groups have been undertaking and are continuing numerous initiatives intended to prevent and to reduce the adverse influence of the sector of natural environment. This has translated into measurable goals. Poland has not only significantly reduced the emission in the last decade, but we also increased its power generation for the renewables. Moreover, Poland overreached 2020 target regarding share of renewable energy. This proves that Poland takes energy transition very seriously and acts upon to reduce emission and in consequence improve air quality. However, what need to be underlined, heating sector is not only the district heating. In Europe, there is still a certain share of individual heating sources which have the highest influence on air quality. Therefore, replacement of old, inefficient household heat sources should be prioritized. The one way is to install new individual heat sources with the lowest possible emission, but there is also an alternative solution which can be provided by the energy sector, an attractive and effective option is district heating. We need to remember that the district heating is based on the heating plants and combined heat and power plants, which must meet strict environmental requirements set by EU law. It is very effective technology dedicated mostly for the urbanized areas. Therefore, we believe that covering heat needs should be done primarily through the use of district heating whenever is possible. Such a model ensures the high efficiency of raw material use, improves the living comfort of citizens, and reduces the problem of the low stack emissions. It's worth mentioning that in Poland there is well-developed district heating system. Approximately 40% of households are connected to district heating networks. The new package Fit for 55 should properly reflect the role of heating system, in particular district heating, in the fight against winter smoke. We agree with the Commission that heating sector has a potential of actively participate in the EU climate goals, but appropriate transitional period must be ensured. We expect that the timeline, which requirements regarding efficiency district heating presented into the Energy Efficiency Directive, will also provide appropriate time to adjust investment plans. Due to the long duration of investment process in the power sector and the need to transform the system by maintaining reasonable and social adapted prices for the heating from the new sources, we would propose to introduce a new definition of an effective heating system from 2030 and to withdraw the eligibility for condition the high efficiency cooperation. Otherwise, further development of heating system might be very difficult, and as a consequence, improvement of air quality will be seriously hindered. Polish heating sector is facing enormous challenges, but a process of transition is already underway. Members of PKE, including Tauron, are actively involved in the transformation of direct heating system. There are many projects under construction which are developed to replace old coal plants with sources that emit less CO2, such as CHPs based on natural gas or biomass fuels. It's worth to underline that Poland is recently years has made enormous effort to diversify sources of natural gas imports. What we are also interested in is hydrogen, which probably will play an important role in the future. As an example of Tauron activities, I can mention the project which is called Hydrogen Poland. The aim of the project is to establish a consortium of combining the scientific and industrial potential that can cover the whole hydrogen value chain with their competence. The green hydrogen will then be used mostly by the bus fleet and help to reduce the emission in Polish cities. The project is in the line with the assumption of the IPCA program, Important Project of Common European Interest, and was submitted to this program in March 2021. It's just one example, but we have more innovative projects in Tauron Group. As regard of our district heating segment, the company has successfully carried, for example, a project which is called Integration of Heat and Cold Production of the District Heating Platform, and also a project which is optimization of the heating system in the Silesia-Dąbrowa agglomeration. We are planning in the future to conduct new projects related to the new innovative technologies. To sum up, I can say that I'm convinced that the Polish energy sector will continue supporting the improvement of air quality as well as the fulfillment of the European climate targets. We are aware that transition of electricity and heating sector is necessary, but we want to implement it and we have many ideas how to do it. But in the same time, we call for stable and predictable legal framework, which enable transition in a reasonable pace. I would like to thank all the participants for today's debate and for accepting the invitation. I hope that today's meeting will deliver interesting observation and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, Frederick.
Thanks, Patrick Dembski, for those opening remarks. I understand that you have to leave now, so thanks again and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
We can now start with the opening statements from the panelists, and so we'll get going straight away with the first one, and that's Piotr Sperczak. Piotr, the floor is yours.
Sprzączak, but my name is hard to pronounce even for Polish people. So, hi, hello everybody. My name is Piotr Sprzączak. I'm a director of the district heating department in Polish Ministry of Climate and Environment. Thank you very much for having this discussion. Thank you very much for having me as a panelist. I think that I would like to start with like a simple statement that, in my opinion, district heating is a part of the solution for better air quality, especially in Poland. Of course, as you are probably perfectly aware, in Poland, air quality due to the individual heat sources is often quite poor, especially during the winter time. And what is a paradox in the densely populated areas in the city centers, it is often better air quality than on the outskirts of the cities where individual heat sources operate. And of course, we see it as a big challenge. A lot has been already done. Poland is really keeping the pace on switching the fuel mix of individual heaters, especially through programs like Clean Air Program, which enables individual households to switch fuel from the most pollutant hard coal furnaces into better, more efficient boilers, heat pumps, and pellets boilers. And of course, this is quite a big challenge for Poland, but hopefully what is already being done, it will be continued. As far as I know, heat pump market in Poland grows by about I think in last year it was 88%, so it's quite considerable amount. And even in Warsaw alone, I recently heard that Warsaw installed more heat pumps than London, for example. So this is already happening. The Polish people also want to breathe with clean air, so this is something that we want to pursue. But in order to provide clean air, we also need a district heating. Poland is quite exceptional in this matter in the European Union. Polish district heating sector is one of the biggest in the European Union, and it's quite characteristic because we have like two parallel systems of district heating. One is in a large cities like Warsaw, Poznań, Kraków. It's a very large district heating systems that have, I don't know, 1 gigawatt of installed capacity. Warsaw is an extreme example here, because in Warsaw district heating systems we have 5 gigawatts of installed capacity. And the other market that I want to highlight today is a small municipal heating companies in smaller cities, and there's almost 400 companies, licensed companies, district heating companies in such small areas. So we have large combined heat and power plants in large cities and small boilers in smaller towns. So we have to, of course, we understand that we have to change the fuel mix of the district heating, because district heating in Poland is almost 70% based on hard coal. But we need a full palette of solutions in order to do so. Of course, we understand that now the war in Ukraine poses a threat, because the natural transition fuel for large district heating systems was natural gas. And of course, as Mr. Dembski said correctly, Poland made a tremendous effort in order to diversify the sources of natural gas, with a direct connection to Norwegian continental shelf through Baltic pipeline, and of course the LNG terminal, which is now under the expansion process, and another LNG terminal which will be in Gdańsk. So this is the paramount change in supply of natural gas. By the end of the year, Poland will be completely free of natural gas from Russia. This was a big political priority for the Polish governments to increase the sovereignty of gas imports. And this is already happening. So we will be prepared to ditch Russian gas contracts. But of course, now we need solutions for district heating. Current proposals in the Fit for 55 package partially respond to this need, but from my point of view, I believe that this palette of technologies for district heating systems needs to be as broad and as flexible as possible, because possible solutions for district heating systems, especially large district heating systems, are limited. I understand that renewables will play increasing role, and it is very important for us to decrease the emissions from district heating companies and from the sector. But of course, we have to take into account firstly the security of supply, because Poland can be a quite cold country during the winter time, and when the temperature falls, I don't know, 10 or 15 degrees below zero, we need, of course, efficient systems which will provide special the heat with specific parameters to provide security. So for that reason, Poland calls for the changes in the EED, for example, directive. Of course, we are in close contact with Ms. Claudia Canevary, and we are discussing these issues. From our point of view, there is a necessity to maintain cogeneration process in the definition of district heating companies, the definition of district heating system, because the meaning of definition of efficient district heating system is increasing due to the provisions of renewable energy sources directive. For example, efficient district heating systems will have completely different access to public funding, and in such a large district heating systems like in Poland, access to public funding will be needed in order to change the fuel mix of the systems. So this is why, of course, and also due to the fact that we have a war in Ukraine, and Europe needs to step up with its sovereign sovereignty, energy independence, and decreasing the dependence on Russian gas, we need a broader perspective, and of course we need better understanding of, for example, for combined heat and power units, which are also based on coal. Current proposal changes the definition, so in 2026, coal-fired CHP plants will lose the status of efficient district heating systems, and from our point of view, it should be postponed at least by 2035, because Europe needs to get time to build new infrastructure, build new import infrastructure, build LNG capacities, interconnections between, for example, I don't know, Spain and France, in order to boost the possibility to increase gas imports from another sources. But of course, I don't want to focus only on fossil fuels. Renewables are the future, of course, and I do not want to question that. In terms of individual heaters, as I said, we acknowledge that the heat pumps role will increase, but from my point of view, in a large district heating systems, renewables have to be introduced smart. Of course, we need electrification of district heating. In order to do that, we need special provisions in, for example, new RED directive that will allow to count electricity generated from renewable sources into district heating.
Piotr, thanks a lot. Yes, because you've been speaking a lot, and we have other speakers on the panel as well. We'll have plenty of time to develop around those issues afterwards. But let me give the floor now to our next speaker, Claudia Canevary from the European Commission.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Many thanks for having invited me to this very interesting and very timely discussion. I have a few messages that I would like to share with you as a short introduction from my side, and then happy to discuss and debate in the second phase of this event. So the first point that I would like to mention is that I think that you are all aware that half of the energy that we consume is to heat our buildings, be homes, offices, private and public buildings, and also to produce the industrial goods and services that we depend upon. And the heating and cooling sector is, of course, a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions and is clearly in the spotlight, but also in a good sense of the green transition. What is also important is that the green transition, climate change and energy policies have a very important impact on air policy improvements. In fact, achieving the 55% greenhouse gas reduction that is included in the climate target plan would contribute substantially to the increase of air quality, because it will reduce air pollution by about 60% by 2030 if compared to 2015. And you can see, 60% is really a huge number. And what is very important is the effect that this will have, of course, on health of people, and obviously also on the costs that caring for the negative effects of air pollution on health of people would have, because in fact there will be a reduction of 5 billion euros by 2030 by operating these policies and reducing air pollution in the EU. This gives I think a clear message on the magnitude of what we could do and the effects that these could have. And of course, the 75% of heating and cooling in the EU is unfortunately still based on fossil fuels. And it's clear that there is the need for, let's say, fast and steady exit from all these fossil fuels. The Commission, the EU has been, let's say, promoting decarbonization already for a long time. You know that we have objectives for 2030. Let's say the more ambitious number are being negotiated in this period. And then we have the full, a very important objective by 2050 of having Europe as the first decarbonized continent in the world. So decarbonization, going out of fossil fuels has been in the picture for the EU already for a long time. But it's obvious that the present situation with the war in Ukraine has made the replacement of fossil fuels, I would say, even more urgent. And with the REPowerEU communication that the Commission adopted on the 8th of March of this year, the Commission is committed to, let's say, support the phasing out of the dependence of the EU from fossil fuels from Russia well before 2030. We should consider that this is an opportunity. There are always, unfortunately, even in tragic situations, opportunities to improve. So this is an opportunity to, let's say, start really the route towards full decarbonization without hesitations. So this will bring us with the immediate results of ceasing our dependence from fossil fuels from Russia, but also allow all the very positive effects that the full decarbonization by 2050 will bring. Why district heating is, let's say, part of the solution is because the various analyses that the Commission has carried out, and I think that all the experts know about this, of course, is that it's easier to, let's say, reduce carbon use in district heating than it is in other sectors, such as transport and industry. And this is why the proposals that are now on the table for discussion by Council and Parliament, namely the Renewables Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, have been designed to reduce emissions also in district heating. The idea allows for many different solutions. And what is important to underline is that there is always a very wide flexibility given to member states to decide on the design of measures. So the ED, being a directive, sets the objectives, identify measures, but then the concrete application is left to the member states to decide, considering on the national circumstances, how these measures should be concretely designed. It's obvious that we need objectives because otherwise the risk is that they will not be met, and therefore we will not meet our let's say, decisions to phase out dependence from Russia and decarbonizing the EU. One point that was already recalled is about the definition of efficient district heating and cooling, and this is particularly important to allow for a stronger integration of renewables. But what I would like to underline is that the fact that we have a new definition doesn't mean that, for example, those district heating plants that have already received state aids because of the present definition will cease to have it. This remains. It will not have, let's say, retroactive effects. And also what is important is that the moment there is some move towards including more renewable energy. So there is a plan for new district heating for existing district heating systems to, let's say, change their fuels. Again, there is the possibility of getting state aid. So it is a moving, it's a moving target. It's not frozen. It's not frozen forever. And the last point that I
yes, last point because we have other speakers waiting. Go ahead. to conclude.
Okay, it's just the very last point is that the EED has also an important point as regards the development also with municipalities and communities with population above 15,000 inhabitants to have plans to develop renewable-based heating and cooling in their areas. So, because it's very important to look into the local and regional, let's say, realities as well. With that, I conclude my short introduction, and I'm happy to engage in the discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claudia. Let me turn now to Kieran Cuff from the European Parliament. Kieran.
Good morning, and thank you, Frederick Simon, for hosting this event. And as rapporteur in the European Parliament for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, I'm very happy to be joined here with you today. And I was listening quite carefully to the previous speakers, and I agree with a lot of what they said. Patrick talked about the need for stable and predictive energy sources. We absolutely do. And Peter was talking about how we need a palette of energy choices. And of course, we need to make sure that we are not simply dependent on one source. And as Claudia just said, we need to involve local communities, local towns in the choices that are out there. But first, let me look a little bit at the facts. The European Environment Agency estimates that long-term exposure to poor air quality is responsible for over 400,000 premature deaths in Europe each year. And the European Environment Agency estimates that Poland has the European Union's most polluted air. And they note that air pollutants caused nearly 50,000 premature deaths in Poland in 2018. And look, very simply, the longer the lead in that we have to clean energy sources, the more people will die. Most of these deaths were caused by PM 2.5s, very small particles in the air. And in the European Union, PM 2.5s are killing 379,000 people every year. So 1 in 8 of those deaths are occurring in Poland. And that's in comparison to 1,300 premature deaths caused by poor air quality in Ireland. So we're very fortunate in Ireland, but in Central Europe, we unfortunately are still very dependent on energy sources that are causing very poor air quality and that are killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. So we need to move towards clean fuels for district heating, and we need to electrify everything that we can and move to cleaner sources of electricity. But I strongly believe that we can tackle the issue of air quality in the EPBD by encouraging homeowners to switch to cleaner energy systems, such as electric heat pumps. And the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it says that the effects of climate change will hit the world's most vulnerable people hardest. And climate change will also introduce the world's most at-risk people to devastating impacts through shocks of water shortages, droughts, floods, and bad air quality. So I think the Commission's proposal is a step in the right direction. But as always, there's a lot more that we can do. The IPCC report gives a damning indictment of failed global leadership on climate. And I believe it's my role and those of my colleagues in the European Parliament to give the leadership the impetus to act and bring our buildings in line with the climate objectives. Last week, we saw the Commission release its blueprint on how the EU can become independent of Russian gas. And that includes a call to increase Europe's heat pumps and rooftop solar photovoltaics. So I believe in the revised Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, we need to include these rollouts in the text so that we can have it enshrined in legislation. And more must be done to encourage member states to increase the energy transition to renewables and to boost their renovation numbers. I think it's also important to foster a greater societal acceptance that fossil fuels are becoming a thing of the past. And we must remember every cent that we spend on energy efficiency and renewable energy is one less cent going to Putin's Russia. Renewables account for 11% of the Polish energy sector, and I think it's important that this figure grows in the years ahead and that we can move forward with the energy transition. Looking at the breakdown of the figures, I think there's scope for enormous growth in photovoltaics within the Polish context. And I think Poland, as an example, has been very dependent on Russian fossil fuels. And it can be the example of a country that makes the switch to renewable energy in order to break free from the Russian dependence. And I think we can use the current crisis as an opportunity to start that process. Many countries around Europe have shown that district heating is a really efficient way forward when it comes to the heating sector. And I'm glad to hear of the changes that Tauron are making. But we need to start incentivizing member states to invest in district heating powered by renewables. And while there's a lot of district heating grids in Poland, the vast majority are still coal-fired. So we have to replace that with other energy supports. And I do see signs of that happening in Poland. Look, as an architect, I can see the importance of a building's infrastructure in its overall energy performance. And we do need to drive forward the decarbonization of buildings, specifically the heating and cooling. And we can also use buildings to power up the vehicles that we use to get around. So there's the possibility of a real synergy in using buildings to provide power for our cars and other vehicles. So,
thanks, Kieran. Yes, maybe just one sentence to conclude now.
Just one final conclusion. We can't do this in isolation. We need training programs to bring our workforce up to speed to cater for this electrified future. And I certainly think the move is in the right direction. The Ukraine crisis will help us move in that direction, and it'll produce sustainable and healthy buildings. And I think what we've learned from the COVID pandemic is that we need clean air in order to improve people's health, and the EPBD can help us to achieve that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran Kerf. Let me turn now to Margarita Toloto for the final of the opening statements.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks a lot for the invitation to today's debate. I'm really happy to be contributing to an event which in the title has the words heating and air quality. I think it's a very important combination, and it's not often the case that we see these words together. I will try to keep it to the 2 minutes that were required in the beginning, so I will just touch on some points that I think are relevant. First of all, policy coherence. I think the EU needs to be considering air quality deeper in the legislative processes that are especially ongoing at the moment. I'm referring to the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy, the Taxation Directive. I think it's really important that we keep in mind that air quality is not just a kind of side effect about policies that are touching on other things. It's something that is demanded by EU legislation. We have legal obligation to deliver air quality. Therefore, it is to be considered a priority in any decision-making processes that is ongoing at the moment. Furthermore, the Commission has also elaborated the Green Deal, which has produced a zero pollution action plan, which is aiming at a zero pollution ambition. To me, these are not just words, it's a commitment, and I'm really, as an NGO, we are really trying to make sure that there is, that air quality is considered in every single legal piece that is supposed, and we hope will deliver on existing legal objectives on air quality. There is the ongoing revision of the ambient air quality directives, which is also supposed to tighten air quality standards for ambient air quality in the EU. We are hopefully going to see some legislation appearing also to regulate indoor air quality, which is especially relevant if we consider domestic heating, which is also part of this debate. I think we are in the right time to we are late actually. We are now demanded to be more tough in delivering what legislation already recognized to European citizens as their right, meaning the right to clean air. And we are looking forward to collaborate with stakeholders that are also participating and contributing in this debate to make sure that there is coherence and that we achieve what we agreed already on. Thanks a lot again for the invitation.
Thanks, Margarita Toloto. We can now open the panel discussion. And let me start with this question to you, Piotr Spurczak. So gas prices in Europe are currently at the highest they've ever been, and they're likely to remain high for the foreseeable future, according to most projections. So how does that affect Poland's plans when it comes to district heating? Does this mean coal power plants supplying district heating networks will have to stay online for longer? And what would be the impact then on air quality?
I think that maybe I will start from the last part. I don't think that maintaining a small role of coal in the district heating will have a profound impact on air quality, because, as I said, air quality issue is mainly connected with individual boilers rather than district heating systems. District heating systems are compatible with the IED directive, with MCP directive, with BATs, so best available technologies. So they are equipped with filters which limit the pollution of the dusts of NOx, etc., of sulfur. So from the standpoint of air quality, district heating companies do not have such a profound impact. Of course, they do have impact, because this is still fossil fuel based source, but not as much. When it comes to gas prices, yes, I think that it will have impact. I think it will have a bigger impact once again on individual clients, because they will be more interested in long-term effects, so with the operating costs of the heating source, and they will more focus on renewables. As I said, the heat pump market in Poland is booming, and the government will introduce new program for installation of heat pumps for individual users and to support it. So I think that we are going in this direction. When it comes to district heating companies, I'm not sure it will have such a profound impact because, for example, the investment process of creating a CHP plant based on natural gas takes 3 to 5 years. So you have to take into account the 20-year period of time when assessing such investment. And for the large district heating systems, it's simply there is no alternative. Because, for example, I use this extreme example. If we would turn into biomass for Warsaw district heating systems, we would need biomass equivalent to the area of Brussels area each year. So I don't really see this too sustainable. So, of course, heat pumps will play a role, and what the European Commission in the Article 24 with the efficient district heating system is proposing to have minimal shares of renewables. This is sound. I understand it, that we have to increase the share of renewables, but as I said earlier, we also need what is available, because we have a specific budget time frame. We have now ability and the money to invest, and we need to change the sources now within the next few years. So I understand that we can discuss green hydrogen, for example, but the green hydrogen will not be commercially available on the scale to switch 53 gigawatts of installed capacity in Polish district heating sector within the next 5 years. We need technologies that are available here and now. And this is why natural gas as a transition technology, to some extent, will still be used. Of course, the individual investment decisions of companies, of course, will be affected by the current crisis, and they will maybe focus more on renewables and increase using heat pumps in the buildings, for example, to decrease the use of gas in a central unit. But I don't think it will have a very, very profound effect, because simply there is no technical alternative for the moment. And one last remark, if I may, regarding the need for the CHP plants in Polish energy sector. CHP plants in Poland produce 17% of electricity. If we will cut it out and remove it and switch for heat pumps, for example, to install heat pumps in the individual households. We have 3 million individual households based on coal. If we would switch them for heat pumps, we need an additional 10 gigawatts of electricity. We want to cut down 17% of energy produced and then increase the demand for energy by 10 gigawatts. This is something that is really the biggest problem. And of course, I can see the room for heat pumps, but we need to do it gradually. Thank you.
Thanks, Piotr Sperczak. And I have a follow-up question for you coming from the audience. It's coming from Quentin de Hultz from the European Copper Institute. And he's asking, could district heating not use large heat pumps, solar thermal, geothermal, and waste heat as the main heat sources, and then only consider combustion as a secondary or backup?
Yes, of course. This is why I told about that we need a very broad palette of technologies that we will need. But at least a few of those technologies that you mentioned, they need low temperature heat, like 40, 50 degrees. And this revolution should be like end consumer oriented rather than source oriented, because the thermomodernization process and the heat prices, but mainly thermomodernization process, has an impact on Polish district heating market now. The size of the district heating market is decreasing. The demand for heat is decreasing because of the increased efficiency of the buildings. And if we will continue with the increasing efficiency of buildings, of course, we will need less and less heat, and heat with different quality, with lower temperature. And then, of course, the role of combustion will decrease. But as I said, it should be end consumer oriented rather than specific expectations from the sources and from the heat producers. Of course, when it comes to the waste heat, we should also consider where this heat is coming from, because if this heat is coming from, I don't know, heavy oil or hard coal, then it's questionable whether, for example, high efficient cogeneration with EPS standard of 270 grams per kilowatt hour is really a worse source of heat or not. But yeah, I don't know whether this answers your question.
Thank you, Piotr. Let me turn to Claudia Canevary now with a question about gas prices, which are currently at the highest and probably likely to remain so, according to the Commission. So how does that change the European Commission's assumptions when it comes to the decarbonization of heating in Europe? And what could be the impact of this on air quality? Because if countries like Poland or maybe Romania prolong their coal-fired power plants for heating purposes, there will be an impact on air quality.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. In fact, the fact that gas, that energy prices are higher, makes actions linked to energy efficiency more interesting, because the costs for acting on energy efficiency will be lower. The Commission is assessing this aspect in the sense that that there is a study that has been also mentioned in the draft report by Mr. Nils Fuchslang, rapporteur for the EED, prepared by ICF, that indicates let's say a potential for a target for the energy efficiency from an economic point of view, 30% and 18% from a technical point of view. So clearly, so there is at the moment a difference of 5 percentage points between the economic feasibility and the technical feasibility. But the assumption is that with the increased energy prices, this gap will be let's say smaller, and therefore there could be the possibility of having cost-effective measures that will bring let's say a higher result as regards the energy efficiency target. Why I'm saying this? I'm saying this because it's important not to lose track of our medium to long term objectives. And let's say the support that is being given to the member states through the various funds that exist in the European Union should help let's say addressing also the present difficulties. I have to say that from our side, the increased prices should not bring, let's say, slowed down results in phasing out fossil fuels, because this is indeed the direction we need to take. On the contrary, the present situation should push for, let's say, more ambitious and speedy actions. There is also a very good understanding from the side of the population, because I think that everybody feels supportive towards, let's say, actions that will allow the EU to withstand the present crisis. So I think that in the immediate period, for very short-term measures, which are not energy efficiency measures in reality, but they are energy savings measures, I think that people could probably contribute substantially. And I assume that at least a large part of the population will be happy to do so. So, promotion of measures like maybe trying to think about the energy consumption in households or decreasing the use of cars could be well received by the population, and this could help decreasing also the consumption in general. So I'm just quoting a couple of small examples, of course, but I think that we should not lose the medium and long-term objective, which will de facto really make the EU resilient to energy shocks that might also happen in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Canevary. And I have a follow-up question coming from the audience, from Irena in the audience. So she's asking, why shouldn't we promote more the use of all available renewable sources in heating instead of focusing only on 3 single solutions? And there's related to that a question from the Solar Heat Europe Association, emphasizing that solar thermal is actually the cheapest currently in Central and East European countries, together with solar PV, and he's asking why not promote that even further.
Thank you for the questions. In fact, there is no limitation to the renewable sources that are being promoted. As you know, the proposals from the Commission are always technology neutral. This is really important also because it is obviously left to each member state, depending on its own national circumstances, to decide on how to go forward. So there is no promotion of only some limited sources. And of course, there are some member states where there are more PVs, where wind, others where wind is more used. So it's really very much left to each member state to decide. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm missing something from the question, but there is no limitation. And for example, if we are talking about district heating, this is, let's say, a technical solution that could help, but is of course not the only solution. And it's certainly more interesting for those member states where district heating already exists, because then it's much easier to let's say decrease and then exclude the use of fossil fuels. So I don't know whether the question is in the direction of district heating, but in any case, it's really, as I said, that there is no specific no indication that one is preferred over another one. In fact, everything is on the table. And in fact, what is very important to remember is that we need the contribution from all possible solutions in order to, and all the sectors in order to decarbonize and decrease the energy consumption. So this is, I think that's very important to keep in mind.
Thanks, Claudia. Question for Kieran Cuff now. So you're rapporteur for the EPBD in the European Parliament. How has your work been affected by the current crisis in Ukraine and the sudden rise of gas prices in Europe? Are you introducing some specific changes to the EPBD proposal as a result of this?
Well, I certainly believe that the crisis in Ukraine creates a new momentum or a new impetus to move faster on improving the energy performance of buildings. I think in particular, the suggestions we've seen from the European Commission through the Repower EU, that we fast track the use of rooftop solar and of heat pumps. I think these are sensible suggestions that we can incorporate into the revisions that the Parliament will bring to this directive. And I think it shows that we need to move further and faster. But I'm not saying that everyone is in agreement on this. I think there is some conservative voices who would like us to move more slowly and to simply substitute Russian energy supplies for supplies from other volatile regions around the world. So there is quite a political dynamic to our work. But look, I think there's always been compelling reasons to move forward with energy efficiency. First and foremost, to save the planet. But I think we've realized the important role of energy sovereignty for the European Union in the light of Russia's war in Ukraine. So there are other reasons for doing so. And I think particularly in many parts of Europe, one of the reasons for doing so is to protect public health because of poor air quality. So we have climate action, we have energy sovereignty, and we have the issue of tackling poor air quality that was highlighted by the COVID pandemic. So I think, if anything, we need to move more quickly on the revisions to the directive and be more ambitious in terms of scope.
So being more ambitious in terms of scope, maybe you can expand on that a bit. And two more questions, if I may. There's one frequent criticism that we hear on the EPBD proposal is that it looks at buildings in isolation without looking at the wider neighborhood. And that is, of course, important for district heating. Maybe you have a few thoughts to share on that. Maybe you're introducing changes to the EPBD proposal in order to take account of that, where the buildings are actually situated. And there's one question related to this coming from the audience. about buildings in rural areas which are not connected to district heating or the gas grid or anything. And for them, heat pumps can be too expensive and unaffordable. So what solutions do you propose in the EPBD to address those situations?
Yeah, to take that last point first, yes, in some areas the price of heat pumps is quite high, but it is reducing in recent years. And in countries like Finland, where they are widespread, the cost is much lower than it is in other parts of Europe. I think 70% of new homes in my own country of Ireland now have heat pumps being installed, and that is reducing the costs associated with them. In terms of the neighborhood approach, I've spoken at length about this over the last year, how we have to work with communities and with neighborhoods to find the right solutions. Clearly, district heating is part of that approach, but there are other areas within the EPBD where we can ensure that a neighborhood approach is taken. I think traditionally energy policy has been very much a top-down paradigm, and we want to not invert that model, but we certainly want to ensure that communities are represented, that their voice is heard, and that there are mechanisms for them to engage with the provision, supply, and distribution of energy. And I will be looking through the directive at where we can do that. And then to go back to your initial point about where we can increase our ambition, well, I think the minimum energy performance standards is certainly something that many member states have, and I would hope that we can bring those in at a European Union-wide level. I think we need to focus on the social housing sector, and we need to focus on the worst performing buildings where often people are very subject to energy poverty. And an area where there is real concern is over the rental sector and the private rental sector in particular, where there is a fear that renovations can lead to evictions. So I'm hoping that we can find a mechanism within the revisions to improve the worst performing buildings and ensure that energy poverty is really tackled.
Thanks, Kieran Kav. Question now for Margarita Toloto. We're seeing record high gas prices now on the market in Europe because of the geopolitical situation. How is that affecting the discussion on heating decarbonisation in your view? Are you concerned, for example, about a resurgence of coal as a result?
I was listening already several times this argument about gas prices being a kind of justification for rediscovering coal and coal regaining space in the energy scenario in the EU. I think it's actually unfair to use the Ukraine war as an argument to rebuild space for coal. It's really unfair towards European citizens and towards their right to live in an environment which is clean. And as I said before, it's unfair towards their right to breathe cleaner air. I think the health emergency that have been highlighted in also by some previous speakers is always very relevant. It's always worrying, and I think we don't have time to reopen debates that have been closed in terms of importance. I think we have already assessed that coal is a thing of the past, and it has to be a thing of the past, despite what is happening around the world. I think the EU has the potential and has the capacity to build its renewable energy scenario and efficiency in order to be able to go away from coal. And we already are committed towards this objective, even if we look at existing legislation. I mean, having a legislation which is asking you to reduce air pollution obliges you to look also at coal and obliges you to go away from coal. So I think we already are bound by what we have on the table to forget coal and to go towards renewable energy. I think one thing I want to mention is that the WHO has recently published its revised and updated guidelines on air quality. They are suggesting air quality standards that are much more tightened than the existing one at EU level. I think this is something that we have to consider, and as I said before, to be sure that is absorbed by each discussion, debate, legislation, decision-making processes, being this at official or unofficial debate. I think we really have to reassure people that legislators are there to make sure that they obviously have access to the energy they need. They can heat their houses, but they also have clean air to breathe. In particular, in the EU, domestic heating is responsible for more or less 40% of particulate matter pollution. This is obviously a huge range of contribution. It has not been mentioned up to now, but I think, for example, insulation is one way to go for sure. Energy savings also means not using energy if we can isolate houses and ensure that people can heat their houses without polluting. I think there are several things that can be put together, several pieces that can be put together to compose a puzzle which deliver on energy demands and also on environmental protection and health protection at the same time, while also saving costs and while also making Europe independent from Russia, obviously. So I think we are touching on the all-important point of information, but we need to make sure that these are not just discussions that are reflected in legislations and policies.
Thanks, Margherita. And allow me a follow-up question. I mean, don't you see a trade-off immediately now in the short term between energy security on the one hand, caused by the situation, the geopolitical situation, and decarbonization plans? Again, I'm thinking about coal being considered in the short term. And also in the long term, there could be an opportunity, this is what some are starting to argue now, that in the energy transition, this crisis could help us skip the transition phase with gas that a lot of countries like Poland have had and go straight to the renewable phase. What are your reflections on this?
I actually hope so. I mean, I'm really hoping that the actual situation is helping us in skipping the gas step as an intermediate phase where we need to go through in order to go away from coal. I think this was something that has been presented also not in a correct way to the general public, with gas being not referred to as fossil fuel. Gas is a fossil fuel. So I think renewable energy, climate neutrality, air quality are all objectives which are taking us away from fossil fuels, including gas. So I totally agree. I hope there will not be a trade-off. It's difficult to foresee how the market will evolve. One thing that can be foreseen is where investments has to go. So I think the EU has an important responsibility here in making sure the Commission, especially, to drive the path toward investments that are actually looking at the right long-term objective, while obviously ensuring access and enough energy for European citizens, but making sure that we are not, as I said before, using the situation and the war in Ukraine as a pretext to still lock us in the fossil fuel debate and go back in probably 15 years time when we were still trying to identify, okay, how do we go away from coal and gas? I think we have identified the solutions, and it's important to put the money there and to actually jumping on the step of gas, I think, is the best way to go.
Thanks. Question for Claudia Canevary. So the Commission presented plans earlier this month to eliminate Russian gas entirely, well before the end of this decade. Have you made, or are you currently making, some kind of impact assessment of this when it comes to the consequences, for example, in the heating sector, and the cost of this, and also potentially the benefits? And I'm thinking of air quality here potentially.
Thank you. As you know, there is a revision going on of the Air Quality Directive, and I think that the colleagues that are responsible for these are looking certainly into the present situation, and I suppose that in the dialogue then with the Council and Parliament on the table. I have to confess that I'm not aware concretely of actions being taken in this respect, but I'm sure that consideration is given. I have already mentioned before in the previous reply that I gave that we are looking into how the effects of higher gas and energy prices is on the energy efficiency and renewable energy targets. And you know that there is also proposal by the rapporteurs on the two directives to increase the targets in order to speed up the decarbonization of the EU. And indeed, the Commission is looking into these additional, or let's say these higher target, and see, let's say, how the impact, and to see how to assess the impact. So it is very important to make sure that indeed there is a clear indication of the cost effectiveness of these actions. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. I think we've reached the end of this conference, but before we close, I will ask each one of you to summarize very quickly in 10 seconds what you would want your main message to be for our audience to take away home with them. And so I can start with you, Claudia Canevary.
Thank you very much, Frederic. For me, it is really to not to lose the objective of the full decarbonization by 2050, and how important it is what we are doing there to improve air quality and let's say increase the quality of life of citizens.
Thanks, Claudia. Let me turn to Kieran Cuff now for some very quick concluding words.
Yeah, well, I think really, apologies for the fire alarm in the background, it's just a hairdryer. But really what we need to do is provide legislative certainty. And I think that has to be based on scientific evidence. And I think the compelling message from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is that we need to move faster and with greater certainty. And I think that's the role of the European Parliament, to bring about that certainty.
Thanks, Kieran Cuff, and the alarm adds a little extra sense of urgency to this debate. Let me ask now Margherita Tellotto for your concluding words.
Thank you. I think environmental protection, health protection has to go through policy coherence, and we are now in the time where we are actually discussing many legal instruments that can deliver on those things, and we don't have time to lose despite the international scenario. I think we need to keep the bar straight and go where we need to go. Air quality is a priority, and it's a right for EU citizens. Thanks.
Thanks, Margarita. And Piotr Speczak now for concluding words.
Yes, thank you. In my opinion, air quality is very important, and district heating systems are part of the solution. From our point of view, the regulatory framework that is being now prepared in the European Commission should take into account all available technologies and just the end results that we want to achieve, but should take into account the technological neutrality and ability of member states to take into consideration the local circumstances in order to achieve them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr. I think this wraps up today's event. A big thanks to PKE for supporting it. A big thanks to our speakers as well for being with us today, and for our audience for following us. If you've missed the beginning of this debate, you can watch it again on YouTube and other social media. And if you'd like to know more about upcoming Euractiv events, you can check our websites, events.euractiv.com. We hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.